Gauri, you can start.
Good evening and a warm welcome to all our speakers, participants, scholars, students, and lovers of art and heritage who have joined us from across India and around the world. The purpose of art is washing the dust of daily life off our souls, said Pablo Picasso. Perhaps the murals on the walls of our caves and temples were created with a similar intent. The idea being to lift our mind off the everyday into the timeless. With great pleasure, I invite all of you to day 2 of Tamil Heritage Trust's Indology Festival 2026, titled Caves, Courts and Beyond, Painting Traditions of India. For those of you who are joining us only today, in this festival, through 6 days, we are attempting to explore the rich and diverse painting traditions of India across time and space. Beginning with some of the earliest expressions of Indian art found on rock surfaces and the walls of caves, we move on to temple murals and courtly traditions, and then manuscripts and portable painting traditions, and then regional painting styles, right up to the painting practices as they continue to thrive among living communities in India even today. Before we move on to the main event, I'd like to give you a very brief introduction about Tamil Heritage Trust, which is our organization. Tamil Heritage Trust is a voluntary organization that was started by a group of like-minded people almost 16 years back with the explicit objective of understanding, appreciating, disseminating, and celebrating information related to India's rich history and heritage, not just for the benefit of those who are scholarly or academic minded, but the average enthusiastic public as well. Towards this end, THT conducts events and programs throughout the year. Chief amongst these are our talks and seminars. We have a monthly talk on the first Saturday of every month. Then, of course, our Indology Festival. We are in the midst of the 7th year this year. And then we have an in-person oratory concert, which we conduct in the month of December in Chennai every year. Apart from this, we also conduct various one-day workshops where anybody can join and participate, on and off classroom sessions, and specific sessions for specific target audience like the school teachers of Tamil Nadu, etc. Apart from all these initiatives, from the Tamil Heritage Trust, we have also instituted 2 awards every year. The first award is named after our co-founder and is called Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award. This is given for individual contributions in the field of history and heritage. The second award is named after V. Venkaiah, the first official Indian epigraphist, and instituted by Miss Sunita Madhavan, his great-granddaughter. THT has been entrusted with the responsibility of administering this award, which is given for individual contributions in the field of Indian epigraphy. Very soon, we'll be putting out adverts for inviting nominations for both these awards for this year. We have a YouTube channel where you'll find links to all our talks, right down to today's talk. Kindly subscribe and click the bell icon to receive notifications. These are our social media handles. This is our mailing address. You can mail us here, either to join our mailing list or to contribute in any voluntary capacity to any of our initiatives. We do not have any dedicated financial backing, so any kind of contributions are welcome. You may use this QR code or ID to contribute, and the same will be appreciated. That, in a nutshell, was about Tamil Heritage Trust. Yesterday, we began our festival with 2 talks where we tried to explore some of the earliest painting traditions of India found in the rudimentary caves of central India and Buddhist caves of Ajanta, and try to understand the worlds from which they emerged. Today, we will be moving a little more forward in time, and we'll be looking at the murals that flourished on the walls of temples and caves, which took the painting tradition of India further into the early and medieval periods. The theme for today is Early to Medieval Temple Art, South India. Although the focus today is going to be broadly on South India, we will be beginning today with a broad pan-Indian overview of the great Indian mural tradition and the remarkable continuity that it shows across regions and centuries. Exploring this lesser-known chapter from the history of Indian art will be Binoy Bahal in the first part of his lecture titled Murals of India, including Pallavas, Cholas and Chittanavasan. While the murals of Ajanta are widely celebrated, they are in fact part of a much larger and continuous painting tradition that stretches across centuries and regions of India. Many of these ancient paintings survive in temples, caves, and monasteries, often hidden from public view and little known outside specialist circles. Through decades of research and documentation, Professor Binoy K. Bahal has helped bring these extraordinary works to light and has demonstrated the continuity of India's painting traditions from ancient times onwards. This evening, he'll take us on a visual journey through India's ancient mural traditions with special emphasis on the murals of Pallavas, Cholas, and Chittanavasan, revealing the continuity, sophistication, and artistic achievement of a painting heritage that ranks amongst the finest in the world. Any true lover of Indian art history really needs no introduction to Binoy Bahal. But for those who are uninitiated, few individuals have documented India's mural heritage as extensively and as tirelessly as Professor Bahal. For nearly 5 decades, he has traveled across India and Asia, photographing, filming, and researching artistic traditions, creating one of the most significant visual archives of Asian art and heritage. Professor Bahal is a filmmaker, art historian, photographer, and adjunct professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru. Through his books, films, exhibitions, and lectures across the world, he has brought India's artistic heritage to the audiences far beyond the academia and helped to transform our understanding of the continuity of Indian painting traditions. A very warm welcome to you, Professor Binoy Bahal. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Gauri, for that introduction. And thank you also, and thanks to Ashwin Prabhu for your warm interest and invitation to address the audience of the Tamil Heritage Trust. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to be here speaking to all of you. In fact, speaking for the Tamil Heritage Trust brings back to mind decades of my love of Tamil Nadu and my many travels, the many weeks that I have spent from time to time in that beautiful state, including that magical 1 month in the December of 1992, when I documented the previously unphotographed inner ambulatory paintings of the Brihadishwara temple at Thanjavur. It was indeed a absolutely marvelous time, wonderful time doing that. What had happened is that the IGNCA had been trying to document these paintings with the help of French photographers. And in the meantime, I became well known for my photography of the Ajanta paintings, which brought the details and colors of these ancient paintings to light for the first time. I was immediately asked to please document uh, the end 10th century paintings and Nayak paintings in the Brihadishwara temple. And it was a marvelous experience. I made an initial trip in which I studied the spaces inside the very narrow inner ambulatory, which had just 5 feet, 5.5 feet of space in between the inner and outer walls, and paintings going up to a height of 20 feet. And going back to Mumbai, where I was based at that time, I got a special aluminium platform, collapsible aluminium platform constructed, which could be rebuilt inside the ambulatory and which would take me up to varying heights so that I could get a straight on view of the paintings at all levels. I did have perspective control lenses, but there are limitations to such lenses, and the aluminium platform helped me very much. And of course, the aluminium platform led to other things. When I was at the top level, right on top, I saw at the height of 20 feet above the ground, 174 uh, sculptural reliefs of dancers, which had previously been unseen in the 20th century and unknown to the temple authorities or to the ASI. There was a celebration of these. I remember the Tanjavur newspapers and others were full of it. And here, in fact, is one of those newspaper reports. The newspaper was very happy to highlight even more the fact that I had discovered the name of one of the painters in the mural paintings, Ramaya, and the 174 sculptural reliefs which were discovered there. It was an absolutely marvelous time, and it was uh, it was an unforgettable and wonderful relationship with the great Brihadishwara temple that I formed in that 1 month. And can I ever forget the wonderful food that I got to have in Tanjavur? In fact, the meals that they are called, the afternoon meals at Tanjavur, were absolutely wonderful. In fact, I think that these traditional meals in Tamil Nadu are an important part of the living heritage of the world and should be better known everywhere. And Tamil Nadu, otherwise, also has been a wonderful place that I've enjoyed visiting again and again. And many of my friends have been Tamilians, including very dear friends of mine. And it has been, I would say that along with the Japanese, with whom I seem to relate very closely and dearly, the other community I relate to extremely well over the years has been the Tamils. It's been a joy. Now, my talk today is, of course, about the mural paintings of India. It was back in 1990 that the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, when he saw my photographs taken at night of monuments, when he saw my techniques of low light photography, said to me that he told me about glorious paintings of Ajanta, the most important paintings of India, and perhaps among the most important paintings of the entire world, and how these had never been clearly photographed, in fact, not even clearly seen before. And he felt that such a technique of low light photography in darkness, as it was loosely called, would be of immense value in bringing these paintings to proper light before the world. In 1991 and in 1992, I had the good fortune to photograph these paintings in great detail. Scholars in India and around the world who had studied these paintings for even 40 years of their lives, like the late Karl Khandarawala or the late Stella Kramrisch and others, all said that they had never seen the details and colors of the Ajanta painting so accurately, so well, so vividly as they were seeing in my photographs. It was a marvelous experience for me. In fact, newspapers, all major newspapers in India, all major magazines in India, and others around the world came forward to praise this work. And universities and museums around the world immediately invited me. The British Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, the University of London, the Smithsonian Institution, the Tokyo National University of Fine Arts and Music, and so many others all wanted me to come and lecture on these paintings and to show these slides. You would be happy to know that there was a unanimous response of these finest art critics and art historians who had gathered at these capitals of culture of the world to see the Ajanta paintings. And that response was that these were surely the finest art of humankind. And this was not only because of their amazing technical virtuosity, of which there was so much, and of which they spoke immensely. And they said that uh, technically they had qualities which European art, for instance, uh, gathered only in 1,000 years later in the late Renaissance, and other qualities which European art only found even later, the Impressionistic period and the Expressionistic period. Even qualities which were in modern art were sometimes visible in these mainly 5th century paintings. However, what made these paintings truly very valuable to the world, beyond all this technical virtuosity, was the vision of life which they contained. It was a vision of the world which saw the same in you and in me, and in all the flowers, the trees, the animals, the birds, all that there is in the world was seen as united, seen as one. And obviously, this gave a great sense of grace and compassion to every line made by the painter. It is truly this that made these paintings the greatest art of humankind. But it was later when I had, in the December of 1992, documented the end 10th century uh, murals of the Brihadishvara temple, that art historians, for instance, Dr. Milo Beach, who was the American expert on Indian paintings and was the director of the two American National Museums of Asian Art at the Smithsonian Institution. He responded, so as did others. He said that he would have to revise his understanding of the history of Indian painting. So when I asked him, Milo, why do you say that? He said that the paintings of Ajanta were known to us, but because paintings before Ajanta were not known, and paintings after Ajanta for the next 800 years were not well known, Ajanta was always considered as a flash in the pan and a tradition of art coming from the ancient period, a tradition of ancient painting was not known in India. And what I was showing now of the 10th century Brihadishvara paintings with the same technical qualities as the Ajanta paintings went to show that there was obviously a great and continuous tradition of painting in ancient India coming into medieval times. I went on thereafter to document clearly other remaining scraps and remaining paintings of the 5th century, 6th century, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, and was able to clearly establish before the world the continuous tradition that we are speaking about. Now, the philosophy of aesthetics was developed at a very early period in India. In this philosophy, it is understood that our response when we see something truly beautiful in nature, such as a marvelous sunrise, or in art, for instance, an Ajanta painting, our response in that moment is akin to Brahmanand itself, the ecstasy of salvation itself. For in that moment, the veils of illusion, Maya or Mithya, are lifted, and we are believed to be seeing the grace which underlies all of creation. And therefore, art was extremely important in ancient India. And there were these hundreds of thousands of sculptures, and there were immense quantities of mural paintings that were painted right across all the caves, all the temple walls, and all the ceilings. And it is this absolutely wonderful heritage, which fortunately we do have enough remnants to be able to bring this history before us. And not only the history, but to be able to bring this art before us, to be able to move us, to transform us still in today's day and age, in the midst of all this commercial world. We are still able to be transformed by the beauty of this ancient art. Ladies and gentlemen, I will start my PowerPoint and take you to these visuals. I have to share the screen first. Start sharing. Once screen. Share the share screen. Okay, I believe the screen is shared. Now I go to files. See and select downloads. Select Windows 38 bits. There we are. I've been able to open my PowerPoint.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, we are able to see it. Yeah.
For oldies like me, the photography and the art history comes much easier than opening PowerPoints. But here we are. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is an enchanted place, the gorge of the Baghora River, where 31 caves were excavated in two phases. One phase around the 2nd century BCE, and the second phase around the 5th century CE. And these were beautifully sculpted and marvelously painted, uh, all the walls or the ceilings. And now they were not so clearly seen because, in fact, the only lights which were allowed inside the caves were running on electricity coming through a dimmer at low voltage and casting orangish light upon the paintings. So, therefore, when you went there or you tried to photograph them, this is normally how they used to look. And of course, they were still considered among the most important paintings, the fountainhead of the Buddhist paintings, the fountainhead of the classical painting tradition of Asia. However, with my technique of photographing in low light, the colors came out like this. That is the same painting you're looking at, but the blues and greens have come out. And with the differentiation of color when it comes out, the details come out. So it was such a joy to see these paintings in their true details and color, which was not possible even when we used to go there. Now, this was not the only problem in seeing the paintings. What you're looking at just now is a painting of enormous consequence and importance. Because in Cave 10, this is a painting of the second century BCE, which is so early for uh, a painting of the classic tradition anywhere in the world. However, as you see, there was early 20th century graffiti all over the paintings, and it was very difficult to see the paintings. So, 25 years ago, I spent a considerable amount of time with my staff working dedicatedly and very, very gradually and slowly to try to remove the graffiti so that your eyes would be able to see the paintings below more clearly, like this. And these are those second century BCE paintings. Already, the great tradition of painting in India, the idealized tradition of art of India, is seen having begun in that period. If you look on the top left, you will see those expressions on those figures. You will see the exchange of glances, the way the figure on the left corner is looking towards the more central figure. And this is not really expected in paintings which are, what is it now, 2800, 2200 years old. Now, if you come down, uh, you see again in the left corner below that depth of expression, that gentleness of expression, that marvelous gentleness of expression. And coming to the center, coming to the dancer, what do you see? In fact, you see the inward look, which is a hallmark of the finest art of India, which traveled from India to all the countries of Asia. That inward look, which is what makes the paintings of India masterpieces before the world. That inward look is already there in the second century BC. Imagine that. And coming back to paintings of the fifth century, here we see uh, the first figure that you had seen where the orangish light was there was a princely figure carrying an offering of lotuses for him that you see now. This is the Bodhisattva Vajrapani. Bodhisattva, as you would know, is a being on his way to enlightenment. And Vajrapani means the bearer of the thunderbolt. The thunderbolt being one of the very favored images of the Indian philosopher and the Indian artist since the earliest times. In fact, the earliest deity that you see in Indian art is in the Buddhist caves of Bhaja, and it is Lord Indra. And Lord Indra, as you are aware, is also the bearer of a thunderbolt. In fact, the latest form of very popular Buddhism is also called the Vajrayana school, the vehicle of the thunderbolt. And here you see, with that glorious crown of his and that depth of expression, you see the majesty of the spirit within us, brought before us in the Bodhisattva Vajrapani, 5th century. And again in cave 1 of Ajanta, the Bodhisattva Padmapani, whereas the Vajrapani brought before us the glory of the majesty of the spirit. The Padmapani brings before us the peace of the spirit within us. If you look to your left over his right shoulder, you would see that uh, heavenly musician, that kinner, who plays that stringed musical instrument, perhaps not expected in such an early period. If you look to your right over his left shoulder, you would see monkeys playing, and above that, you would see geese. Yet, with all this activity painted around him, he looks within. It is this life of the spirit within which fills the world of this art. It is the constant search within. These paintings, this art, always strives to take us away from the noise and clamor of the material world to the peace and joy which can be found within us. Again, in Cave 1 of Ajanta, a couple in harmony. It is a marvelous sense of harmony which pervades the world of Ajanta. In fact, there are these thousands of figures painted in these caves, and you come away from them having been influenced deeply by that sense of harmony which they exude all the time and everywhere. Now, you may be interested to note the rendering of form, the shading, the gradual lightening and deepening of color, which persuades your eyes of the roundedness of form. Perhaps such sophisticated rendering was not expected in the 5th century, but indeed it is very much a part of the Ajanta tradition and in the spread of this tradition across the land and across other countries to which it went. On the left wall of Cave 1, a scene from the Mahajanak Jataka. Jatakas, as you would know, are stories of Gautama Siddhartha Buddha in his previous birth in the form of different animals and different men. And here, just a little right of the center, you find him as King Mahajanaka. And he's there sitting on the ground with his hands before him, looking up to the hermit giving a sermon with a look of adoration upon his face, which even the damage of so many centuries has not managed to remove. And here you also see the antelope who are listening with as much rapt attention as any of the human figures. For in this vision, the animals are no different at all from any of us human beings. In fact, quite often in these paintings and in this art and in these stories, the animals are given qualities which only the finest of human beings may aspire for. So it's a great world in which all this is seen as united, and there is much which we can learn even today from the paintings of Ajanta. And I take you to a closer view because King Mahajanak was a glorious king. He was a powerful king who had won back the lands earlier lost by his father. But you see the ease with which he sits there on the ground, his hands before him, looking up with a look of adoration upon his face towards the hermit. It is this humility with which we rise. It is this humility which is the message of this art. And having decided, having heard that sermon, King Mahajanak decides to renounce his palace life, his normal life in the world, and he is seen here announcing this decision in the palace. Behind him is his mother, who is aghast at hearing that her son is going to go away into the forest. And in front of him is his wife, Queen Shivali. Now, Queen Shivali's eyes here are painted in a very particular way. By the time these paintings were made, the Chitra Sutra had been penned. The Chitra Sutra, which is the earliest known treatise on art making in the world, gives these thousands of guidelines to the artist on how to make landscapes, how to make animals, how to make people from different lands, how to make expressions upon the faces. And among the in the details about expressions, it shows five different shapes of eyes, which would convey different expressions. And Queen Shivali's eyes made here are in the shape of eyes of a person who is sad or weeping, as well she may have been, for she was hearing that her husband was going to leave her and go away. You might notice her lower garment, which is woven in the form of ikat, which is practiced till today. You may also notice her upper garment, for there is an upper garment which is practically transparent. You see some design on it at her hip. And this reminds you of the fact that India at that time was extremely famous for its very fine textiles. As a matter of fact, Pliny the Elder was writing in Rome in the first century BCE that Roman coffers were being emptied for buying too many fine textiles from India. A century later, Emperor Vesuvius was saying exactly the same thing. Now, you might, among so many beautiful details in this painting, you might like to take a look at the strings of pearls which dangle below her bosom. And you might notice that there's a curve in those purse strings, which shows your eyes, which tells your eyes about the movement, which is absolutely marvelous. And what is even more surprising is that not only were such details being created in the art at that time, but these are also specified and mentioned in the Chitra Sutra. In fact, the Chitra Sutra expects a very high quality of art from the painter. It expects the painter to be able to show the movement of leaves in the breeze, to be able to show the movement of waves upon the sea, and so many things, all of it in an unmoving medium. And behind Queen Shivali, we see palace maids who are responding to the same news. You see the sadness uh, writ upon the face of the two uh, standing maids there, and you see the shock written upon the face of the one who is below. And it is the spirit of caring for others which fills the world of ancient art, which fills the world of Ajanta. It is this amazing caring for others which helps us to transcend our own worldly pains. It is this great experience that you have when you open your hearts out, open your minds out to the world of ancient Indian art. And having taken that decision, here you see King Mahajanak riding out of the palace. You would notice that inward look has already come in his eyes. He begins on another journey, an inward journey, and that peaceful look is upon him. In cave 17 of Ajanta, you see the Vishwantara Jatak. Prince Vishwantar is the final birth of the Bodhisattva. before he will be born as Gautama Siddhartha, who will gain enlightenment and become a Buddha. And here Prince Vishwantar is telling his wife, Princess Madhuri, that he will be going into the forest and will leave the palace behind. And he's suggesting to her that life outside will be very difficult. So she may like to stay back in the palace. However, Princess Madhuri decides to go with him. And again, in the midst of so many beautiful details in this painting, where you also see uh, the perspective in the receding pillars, and you see the elliptical mouth of the vessel which this man is carrying. You might also notice the purse which Princess Madhuri has in her hand. And there you are. Again, you would see the curve in the purse strings, which persuades your eyes of the movement of that purse which she is dangling. Amazing details for the 5th century. And in Cave 17, one of my favorite paintings is of the Mahisha Jatak, Lord Buddha born in a previous birth as a Mahisha, a buffalo. This pesky monkey is troubling him, but the kindly Bodhisattva does not mind. And I'm sure you can see that smile upon his face. And the artist would have meant you to see it because the Mahisha is not really any different from the best of us. And in Cave 17, I show you this scene from the Shaddanta Jataka. In this Jataka, we were shown large animals. You see here the feet of an elephant in the upper right section of the frame. And while these large animals were presented, if you look at the branch of the tree close to this man's head, I will take you to a closer view. And yes, those are ants climbing up that tree. And if you go to Ajanta, most likely you will not be able to see these ants. And the artist may have known that. But for the artist, it was his duty. It was his duty in life. It was his dharma to make these ants, to make the creatures of the world. For him, all the creatures of the world were equally important. And whether we were able to see them or whether we made the effort to see them or not was not his concern. He fulfilled his dharma and presented us the ants. And now we see a rarely seen, a largely unseen painting of the 5th century from the Pitalkhora caves, again in Maharashtra, about 2 hours drive away from Ellora. And though there is much damage, enough survives in these paintings for you to discern that tenderness of expression, which is in fact the very theme of the ancient art. You would notice, of course, the marvelous uh, coiffures which are everywhere in the ancient art. And again, not often seen paintings are in the 5th century caves of Bagh in Madhya Pradesh and in central India. Though it is a different state, as the crow flies, these are not that far from the earlier caves you were looking at. And these are all on a trade route which headed from Nalla Supara, which was a great port uh, where Mumbai is located at present, and came past the Ajanta caves and others to central India, to uh, Vidisha, the granary of central India, and Ujjaini, an intellectual center. You might like to notice the foreshortening of the bull, which you may not have expected in a 5th century painting. You might notice the uh, uh, graphic quality of this art, which may remind you more of modern art rather than 5th century art. And the earliest surviving Hindu tradition painting is of the 6th century in the caves of Badami in Karnataka. And fortunately, I was able to take this picture in 2001 because by the time National Geographic were doing a large story about my work, they traveled to the Badami caves in 2007, and they were not able to spot this painting. So it was not there anymore. And luckily, I photographed it in 2001. And I also spent considerable time in digitally improving the look of the painting so that you are able to discern more, and the painting is like this. And again, you would notice that that inward look, that tenderness of expression, which is quite the same everywhere in this ancient art. And that tenderness is uh, never better seen than in the uh, paintings of the 7th century at Siddhanavasan. These were made on the ceiling of Jaina caves in a very remote part of Tamil Nadu, going through a thick forest full of peacocks, a very, very beautiful place, a very remote place. And here was painted this scene where the faithful were gathering lotuses to put on the resting place of a Jain Tirthankar or saint. And you would notice the importance which is given to all forms of life. The lotuses are given as much attention as the human being. They're made, in fact, as large at least as the human being, and equally with the same tender touch as the human being. Very beautiful depiction of lotuses. I've not seen a better depiction anywhere at all. And I'll take you to a closer view, which will show you the gentleness of the expression. This gentleness of expression is more than anywhere else. Uh, Truly beautiful Jaina art in Tamil Nadu. And again in Tamil Nadu, we move on to the 7th century paintings made in niches inside the outer ambulatory around the Kailashnatha temple, Kanchipuram. Kanchipuram was, of course, one of the greatest cities in human history. And we do not have time here to talk enough about Kanchipuram. But under the Pallavas, many innovations were taking place. The Pallavas were of great consequence in shaping uh, the art of India and the temples of India. And you see that in the jewel-like perfection of the shore temple which they made at Mamalapuram, and in this wonderful Kailashnatha temple. And here in these small niches in the ambulatory, indeed very small niches, in fact you have to push your head inside to see these, survive these 7th century paintings. This is Lord Shiva. And you see changes which are taking place in the art of India. There is a new sense of royal grandeur which has come into the art, which was not there before. And for good reason. As a matter of fact, uh, under the Pallavas, for the first time from Mamlapuram onwards, the temples of India start to be patronized directly by kings. In the ancient period, we can talk about the details. The ancient period, all stupas and temples, as thousands of inscriptions show, thousands and thousands and thousands of inscriptions show, were made through donations of the common people. There were hundreds of common people donating for the making of stupas and temples. But it is, in fact, with the Pallavas that for the first time we start seeing the direct uh, patronage of temples by the king. And there you also see uh, the coming of this new sense of royal grandeur in the art. A rarely seen beautiful painting of the Pallava period is the 7th century painting of Parvati in the Talagirishwara temple at Pannamalai. In fact, this is again a remote village in Tamil Nadu, and high on this hill is this temple. The painting has not often been seen by many people. In fact, when I reached there for the first time in 2001, I was not able to take this photograph because the shrine in which the painting is located had two locks on it. One key was with the Archaeological Survey of India, and the other key was with the temple priest. One key was available to us, but the other was not. Therefore, I could not take the photograph at that time. But I made ample arrangements the next time I visited there in 2005 and was able to photograph this beautiful Parvati. This is a Shivakami. As you know, when Lord Shiva dances his cosmic dance, the dance cannot be without her, without Parvati as the eternal witness. And when she is there as the witness, she's called Shivakami. The tenderness upon her face as she looks upon Lord Shiva dancing makes this one of the masterpieces of Indian art. And we move on from the Pallava period to the Chola period, and we come into the end of the 10th century, where the great Brihadishvara temple at Tanjavur was made. Now, if you look to the left of the temple tower, you may not be able to spot it very easily, but there is a metal staircase going up. And if you go there, if you go up on that, it takes you to an inner ambulance which goes around the Garbhagriha. Now, uh, this ambulatory has only 5.5 feet of space between its inner and outer walls, and paintings originally of the end of the 10th century, repainted over later in the 17th century. And consequently, the later paintings, much of them removed very carefully by the Archaeological Survey of India to reveal the lower layer of the earlier art. And it's difficult to photograph these paintings because the surfaces are shiny and the space is very little. Therefore, any lights that you use are reflected immediately and you do not get to see the paintings very clearly. So when I became very well known for my photography of the Ajanta paintings, I was asked to photograph these, which I did in the December of 1992 and uh, took about 800 photographs like this one. This is in the inner ambulatory. It is Saint Sundarar going up to Lord Shiva in Mount Kailash. He's riding on Lord Indra's elephant, Iravat. And there is a sense of grandeur uh, which has grown since the coming of the Pallava period and is peaking now in the time of uh, King Raja Chola, who was the patron of this temple. and the patron of these paintings. For by now the paintings are, by now the art is made, by now the temples are made, not only to project the greatness of the Lord, but also to portray the greatness of the king who is patronizing the art. And a detail from the ambulatory paintings shows us a musician, and you may be fascinated to note the hand which is poised to strike that little drum, and the straps of that little drum, which show so visibly the movement. So obviously, the artist is completely in control of his medium and is able to show us exactly what he wishes to. And with the coming of a different sense of grandeur and the coming of direct patronage of temples by kings, other changes also occur in the art. Now, in the ancient period, uh, though there were so many stories that were made in art, in sculpture, and in paintings, though there was a depiction of common people, the depiction of animals, so many things in the art, portraits were not made. Individual human beings were not portrayed in the art because the individual human being is only ephemeral. All of us come and go. And as the Chitra Sutra says, we are not important enough to be depicted in something as valuable as art. Therefore, it was the eternal themes which were to be seen in art. And even as one says this, one has to point out that in the first century, there was an exception to this when the Kushanas came from Central Asia and they were not used to the norms of Indian art and traditions. So they had portraits made of themselves in their temples. But immediately after the Kushanas, uh, the art went back to its own traditions. And the change occurs. The first portrait of a king is in fact seen under the Pallavas in sculpture at Mamalapuram. And the earliest surviving portrait in Indian painting of a king is here before you. It is King Raja Raja Chola, the reddish figure that you see. And even as he is breaking tradition, you will see that he's making himself standing behind his guru, Guru Karu Murar. So even as he's breaking tradition, he's being very careful about it. As a matter of fact, this continues till the 13th century, when kings have themselves depicted in Indian art. They normally make themselves very small, they make them behind their guru, or they make them in an attitude of praying before a Shivalinga. So, of course, in much later medieval period, you have any number of kings that are made in any number of scenes. But these are the changes taking place. The Pallavas uh, are the originators of significant grandeur and uh, uh, changes in Indian art, and the Cholas follow through also. And in the 11th and 12th centuries, excuse me, a legendary number of 108 monasteries were made across the Trans Himalayas in western Tibet, Ladakh, Lahore Spiti, and Kinnaur. And these were all of them sculpted beautifully and painted by artists who were invited from Kashmir for the purpose. Kashmir was, of course, one of the greatest Buddhist centers of the world at that time. And this is the sort of art which they created. This is inside the Alchi temple complex. And this is a green Tara. Now, you might like to notice that exquisite rendering of form, which you saw beginning right in the 5th century at Ajanta. You might also like to notice the protruding lines of the further eye of the face. Now, this is a uh, universal tradition in medieval Indian painting, which is also seen in Jaina manuscript paintings and is seen in other manuscript paintings. It is seen in other mural paintings. It is seen even in mural paintings in countries like Myanmar of that period, which were influenced by the Indian tradition. And this is part of the medieval idiom of Indian art. And you might also notice the figures on the mythical creatures mounted on the sides. And it is a sense of great joyousness which pervades the world of the Kashmiri artists. The Kashmiri artists are absolutely marvelous, and the sense of joy is everywhere. Um, 16th century, Venu Gopala in the Mattancherry Palace in Kochi, and Kerala is one of the places which maintains the high quality of Indian paintings much longer than many other places do. And you see here that exquisite rendering of form. You see that beautiful smile upon his face. And with all that gentleness and love, you're reminded of the best of ancient art. And the spread of this tradition is seen in the paintings of Sigiriya in Sri Lanka, where this is the 5th century, and the art historians of Sri Lanka constantly talk about their similarity with the Ajanta paintings. And indeed, they are right. It is not only the Buddhist themes, it is not only the themes of apsaras, it is not only a rendering of form, it is not only the offerings which they carry, but it is also that gentleness of expression, that inward look, that grace which always reminds you that there is an end to the sorrow of the world. And this is 6th century China. It is the caves of Kizil near Kucha, and it is Shiva and Parvati made in a Buddhist cave. As you find, Hindu deities are made in most of the early Buddhist establishments. And uh, Kizil is one of the places which shows a very direct continuation with the Indian traditions. And there's so much to talk about Kumarajiva, who stayed at Kizil, and so many things. A great sharing of traditions between India and China. Myanmar, 12th century. And indeed, all the art historians, archaeologists, and art critics of Myanmar, so many of them had all gathered when I was giving a talk in Yangon, arranged by the Indian Embassy in 2001. And that country, all these people have such a clear understanding of their connection with the Indian tradition. They speak so vocally about it. And indeed, it is so. These paintings in the beautiful pagodas of Bagan in Myanmar are deeply reminiscent of the contemporaneous paintings of the Pala period in the eastern plains of India. And the earliest paintings of Tibet are in a very, very remote location at an extremely high altitude where your head spins. This location is much beyond the Kailash and Mansarovar and is a place difficult of access. And this is of the 12th century. And some historians like to state that these were also painted by the Kashmiri artists. However, personally, I feel that these were painted by artists who were trained under the Kashmiri artists because the form is the same, the theme is the same, much is similar, but some of that exquisite grace of the original artist is not fully there. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the end of this PowerPoint and would be very happy to answer your questions if you have some. Thank you very much. Very. Yeah, somebody has.
Stop sharing.
Yes, I just missed. I should press the red button that came. No, here it comes. Red button. A red button and come here to close.
No, you'll have it as part of the Zoom actually, where you had the share, no, there. Ah, yeah.
Here's the red button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah.
There
Oh,
we are.
that was absolutely brilliant and such beautiful visuals and photographs, and giving us such an in-depth understanding of both the continuity of painting traditions as well as the evolution that we can see over a period of time. It is amazing and something I don't think we've been used to all that much. And now let's move on to the question answer session. Moderating the question answer session today will be Ashwin Prabhu, a heritage and history enthusiast who began his career in the software industry and moved on to education, where he trained young minds to be able to appreciate the rich history and heritage of India. Ashwin is also the author of two books for children on Mamallapuram and Ajanta. One of the oldest and core members of Tamil Heritage Trust, I invite Ashwin to moderate the question answer session now. A warm welcome to you, Ashwin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gauri. But also many thanks to Professor Bell for that absolutely spellbinding talk. And I wouldn't be exaggerating if I said that your talk had this very rare quality of meditative grace, but coupled with rigorous craft and scholarship as well. And I'm sure our audience at Tamil Heritage Trust would have greatly enjoyed your talk and learned a great deal in the process as well.
And if I may add, we have seen many of these photographs, but not in such clarity and beauty like the Panamalai Shivagami and all. Is just two beautiful words. Yeah.
I'm so glad you.
Absolutely, Gauri. In fact,
Yeah.
yeah. In fact, I was about to say that Benoy Bell is quite a familiar name down south, especially here in Chennai. One, because of his magnum opus book, The Ajanta Caves, Ancient Buddhist Paintings of India, which is a Thames and Hudson publication, but also because of the series of coffee table books from the Hindu group of publications on the Art of India series. So I'm guessing that many members of the audience would be familiar with his work there as well.
I told you, any genuine art lover really needs no introduction to Benoy, to be honest. So, yeah.
Okay, so Professor Bell, I'm going to open with a question which may be slightly unconventional. There are many enthusiasts of photography in our forum, and I'm sure many of them have logged in eagerly to watch your talk. I also know you spoke at the Bangalore International Center a couple of weeks ago, and you did mention a little bit about the technical details of the photographic process. So I'm hoping you could just spend a couple of minutes speaking to all the avid photographers in the audience about the process of capturing these priceless treasures in the dark recesses of caves and narrow ambulatory paths, as you described. What were the technical details involved? I mean, you have, of course, mentioned long exposure shots, low light photography, and also we have to remember 91, 92 was very much in the pre-digital photography era. So if you could just walk us a little bit through this technical process of photography. And as a second part to the question, also the art of restoration, because I think pre-AI, maybe even pre-Adobe Photoshop, you've already started experimenting with restoring some of these visuals which you have recorded. So what was that process of restoration like? And what does it mean in this AI age we live in, where at the click of a button, a lot of this can be digitally kind of restored as well. So if you could just talk to us a little bit about these two aspects, that would be nice.
Yes, thank you. Um, I used Nikon F3 camera and Ektachrome 100 ASA film because faster film would have more granular quality and not equally good reproduction of color. And when we speak about the digital age, we must also remember that what is commercially available to people at affordable prices, the, what is available in the market, not talking about the kind of technology which is available to the military or something, but available to the people, the digital technology of cameras is not as high quality as was the quality of, for instance, the Ektachrome film. We are living in a world today where everything has become much easier and become extremely much cheaper, but the concentration on high quality which there was is not really there. So Ektachrome was extremely high quality of film by comparison. Now, yes, we are talking about very long exposures. We're talking about exposures that even went up to not, normally an exposure is 1 over 125 of a second or 1/250th of a second or something like that. So we are talking about my exposures which were not only a full second, not only a full minute at a time, but sometimes even going up to 20 minutes that the shutter remained open. And what made it more difficult is the fact that film was manufactured keeping in mind split second exposures. Therefore, the reciprocity of the film to further light which continues to impinge upon it begins to fail beyond a point. So it's not a straight line graph that more light will lead to exactly more density upon the film. That graph begins to fail. And therefore, what I had to do is to use the same film, the same chrome, chrome emulsion, and to study it for many years, to study its behavioral response at different exposures, to chart that, and therefore to be able to give compensatory exposure. And just to make things more complicated, the failure of reciprocity was different in different ranges of color, in different uh, wavelengths of the light. So all that had to be charted out well in advance. And therefore, by the time I had reached the stage where the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India saw my photographs taken at night of monuments back in 1990, by then this had been perfected. So it was ready really to be used at Ajanta. Now about digital restoration. Um, it was done with Photoshop, and the important thing here is that even though it was done very gradually, and done with a lot of care, and done with a love of many years, an extreme study, close study of the paintings, and with a lot of care and love and an understanding of the painting as an art historian and as a human being responding to the art. Despite that, interfering with the art is not always a good thing. Therefore, when I did this careful digital restoration with Photoshop 25 years ago, I did not bring it out before the world because it was interfering with the originality of the art. Now, eventually, why did I bring it forward? I brought it forward because I began to see during the COVID time, I began to see that all kinds of work was being done particularly using AI for digital restoration. As a matter of fact, a company asked me to be a judge and to judge the work of people who were restoring paintings using AI. And the results were absolutely pathetic. In fact, the result, pathetic is not even a expressive enough word because they were more than pathetic. They were abysmal. They were insulting to the art.
And when was
And
this, Professor Bell? Was this in the recent past?
yes, it was during COVID times. We are talking about the year 2020, 2021, and there is a 21. It was absolutely terrible. So I was shocked by it, and I thought it was my duty to put forward what digital restoration can be and how it can be much more caring, much more loving, much more careful, and understanding of the art, not just a cheap thing created out of nowhere just to brighten up colors and things like that. You see, Ashwin, as you know so well, uh, art reflects the artist who makes it. Any line made by the painter, he's only making himself. Therefore, if he is graceful, if there's grace inside him, if there's knowledge inside him, if there's kindness inside him, if there's compassion inside him, you see it in that line. It communicates itself in the grace of that line. And therefore, interfering with art is interfering all the way with the expression of the artist, and it's not really good. Therefore, it has to be done with extreme care and with a very deep understanding of the art. And still, it has to be done as little as possible. In fact, I would say that the restoration which I have shown you, I do so with apologies that I had to do that restoration. I do not do it with the pride and vigor of somebody who just uses split-second AI to generate very bright images. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That I think was a very, very interesting and sensitive response, Professor Bell. And I think it kind of reveals the way you look at your own craft and the way you look at your own role in preserving memories of this priceless art. As a follow-up question, I have one where you spoke at length about your projects in Ajanta in 91, 92, and then Tanjavur as well in 92. So you're first and foremost an expert photographer, but you're also an art historian and someone who's deeply invested in the study of religion. So can you speak to us about your work process and method? For example, do you read extensively about the sites you're going to be recording visually before you even visit those sites? And the reason I'm asking this question, let me contextualize it. Really, what I'm hoping to understand from you is, does foreknowledge of your subject actually enable you to better capture these works of art, or just going in with a fresh eye of a photographer who's sensitive to this way of visual expression, allow you to bring a certain unique insight which sometimes historians and scholars can struggle with? For example, the line of ants, which you showed us in the background on the tree, in the mural in the Chadanta Jataka in Cave 17 at Ajanta, is, is quite rare and unique. I'm not so sure that any historian or research scholar has actually written about it or even given any emphasis to it, right? And there are several other examples. So can you talk to us about how you approach this project of visually documenting ancient art?
Yes. Firstly, I have to point out to you that I am primarily an art historian.
All right. Apologies, yes.
Photography and filmmaking and giving lectures and holding exhibitions across the world. these are all different forms of media or expression of the art that I study and express about. And I
Then
must
makes your
also
work
share,
even more marvelous.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I would share with you that, in fact, my experience at Ajanta was most meaningful to me. The time that I spent at Ajanta, the time that I was there in front of all these beautiful paintings, in front of all these paintings that spoke to me, in front of all the images of caring for others, in front of all these images of compassion, in front of all these images of grace, transformed me. And subsequently, when I came out of Ajanta, I felt, in fact, that I was a postman who was carrying a message from ancient artists. And it was my desire to carry this message of compassion to as many people as possible. And one must understand that in the uh, ancient Indian tradition of uh, art is in fact supposed to transform you. Art is in fact what reveals the grace which underlies all the maya or mithya, the illusions of the world which are around you. So, art is supposed to awaken the qualities within you, and in the process of that awakening, uh, I was a postman who was trying to see that that awakening could occur in as many people as possible. And uh, in the Indian tradition, experiential knowledge is very important. It is not just a matter of reading, and that's where the role of a communicator, a guru, is very important too. Because you have to experience that for yourself. You have to live that yourself. The truth is always the same. The truth has always been the same and is going to be the same and is going to be found in thousands and thousands of works of art everywhere. But you have to experience that truth. You have to relive that truth. And then you have to share that truth. And that's what my life has been all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we are running a little short of time and our second speaker is ready for her session, but I'm hoping that I can squeeze in maybe one question, Gauri, because I don't want to lose
Yeah.
sight of the fact that this talk was also to introduce us to the medieval Hindu art of Sittanavasal and the Chola murals, and of course Panamalai and Badami and all of that which you showed us. So I want to ask you, Professor Bell, that there's an element of irony here, but given that the Buddhist faith has more or less disappeared from Indian shores, uh, but we have a material corpus of paintings of the Buddhist faith available for us at Ajanta. But on the other hand, the Hindu faith, which is flourishing, we only have fragments of examples of surviving Hindu temple murals, at least from the medieval period, right? So tell us about what exactly has survived in these places you visited, Badami, Panamalai, Tanjavur, Sittanavasal. I mean, are these just fragmentary remains we have? Maybe if you could just spend a couple of minutes telling us what exactly has survived.
Yes. Now, for the main part, it is fragmentary remains. But the great Brihadishvara temple at Tanjavur has a large body of end 10th century paintings. And now, one thing very important when you start talking about Hindu, Jain, Buddhist art, it's important to realize that it was the same tradition of art and the same tradition of painting. It was the same artists, the same guilds of artists who were painting for the Buddhist, Jain, and Hindu traditions. So the art was really the same. It's also important to understand that the ancient inscriptions which survive in India are practically at least 95% of all the knowledge that we have of ancient India, with some addition to that coming from the writings of foreign visitors. Now, these ancient inscriptions show us very clearly that every single family that we know about in ancient India, and I will repeat, every single family that we know about in ancient India had somebody in it who was worshipping a Hindu deity, and somebody in it who was worshipping a Buddhist deity or a Jaina deity. So these divisions between religions is something which would have come at a very later stage. In fact, it is probably the understanding which we formed during the colonial period, because they came with an understanding that there were different religions and that religions were opposed to each other. So they imposed that kind of understanding in what they wrote and said and taught. But in the ancient period in India, this was obviously not so, because within the same family, you had a Hindu, a Jain, or Buddhist, or maybe all three of them. So that's something that's important to understand. It is a philosophic tradition. That's what's marvelous about it. It is philosophic. And it helps us to understand ourselves. It the the purpose is the action part of Indian philosophy is called yoga. Beyond all the treatises, beyond all the arguments, and beyond all the marvelous debates there were about between Hindus and Buddhists and others, the action part is yoga. Yoga in its four forms. Yoga in terms of Gyan yoga, through knowledge itself. Yoga in terms of Bhakti yoga, the losing of oneself, the losing of one's own personality in the devotion to the Lord. The Karma yoga, selfless sacrifice, selfless work that you do, like that. So the four forms of yoga are really, and art is one of them. Art is in fact, it is meditation. Art is always meditation. Maybe on another occasion, if I'm giving another talk for you, or maybe, for instance, if some of you were to attend one of my courses which I teach on art history, you would see how different forms of art, even dance, are actually meditation. They were not created to be put on the stage for people to perform and other people to appreciate and clap, but they were actually meditation. It was an sharing of the experience, sharing of the grace, sharing of the truth. So that is the Indian philosophic tradition in all its parts. The Hindu, Buddhist, Jaina, Ajivika, so many others. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a suitably reflective note on which I'm afraid we'll have to end the session now. I know there are one or two specific questions on YouTube. There's somebody who wants to know how the sheen in the gold ornaments was brought out. Was it a special pigment which was used? But Gauri, I'm not sure we really have time to go into that right now. Thank you so much, Professor Bell, for such an illuminating session. And Gauri, I love you to kind of formally thank him and then welcome the next speaker. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, that was really a lyrical, poetic, and meditative lecture. And then thank you for patiently answering our questions after that. Thank you, Ashwin, for moderating that session.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Now let's move on to the next lecture. Yeah. Professor Behel gave us an great insight into the grand Indian mural traditions of India. Now, some of the most vibrant expressions of these murals were found during the Vijayanagara and Nayaka periods. Largely painted between the 16th and 18th centuries, let us delve a little deeper into the art of these paintings and also try to understand their social, cultural, and religious context in our next talk titled Mural Paintings of the Vijayanagara Nayaka Periods, Context, Styles, and Themes delivered by Dr. Anila Verghese. Found across South India, largely in Tamil Nadu and a few in Andhra, the murals by the Vijayanagara and Nayak dynasties represent one of the most significant chapters in the history of Indian painting. Covering temple walls and ceilings, they combine artistic sophistication with powerful visual storytelling, bringing sacred narratives, local traditions, and the lives of patrons vividly to life. In her talk, Dr. Verghese will place these paintings within the broader context of the pre-modern Indian art, introduce the principal stylistic traditions identified within the Vijayanagara Nayaka mural painting, and explore the major themes depicted in them. Some of the major themes include episodes from epics and Puranas, Sthala Puranas, the lives of the states, sacred Shaiva and Vaishnava landscapes, iconic images of deities, and the fascinating portrayals of patrons, donors, and courtly life. A little bit about the speaker. Dr. Anila Verghese is a pioneering scholar in the fields of Vijayanagara art, architecture, and religion. Her research has shaped our understanding of one of India's most important cultural and political traditions. Dr. Verghese is the author, co-author, and editor of 11 books and monographs and more than 95 research papers. She has lectured extensively in India and abroad and has served as senior guest professor at the Department of Indology, Würzburg University, Germany. Currently, she is working on the project Shaiva and Vaishnava Sacred Sites of the Tamil Tradition. She is also the director of the Sophia Polytechnic, Mumbai, and a trustee of the Society for Higher Education of Women in India. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Anila. I now request you to take over the stage and deliver your lecture.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gauri. And if I may, firstly, I want to thank the Tamil Heritage Trust for inviting me to talk. And may I do my screen sharing? Sorry. I have to screen share.
Yeah.
Sorry. A screen share is wait. Just a minute, please.
Yeah, no problem.
Share screen. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Yes. Not.
Yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You can go into full slideshow mode.
Wait. Now I just have to start it off, please. Yeah. Yes. Firstly, I would like to begin by a confession, namely that I'm not an expert on painting. So when I was asked to speak, first I was hesitant, but then I took up the courage and decided I would. And what I have learned about paintings of the Vijayanagar Nayaka periods is mainly from my travels with my research colleague and dear friend, Dr. Anna Dalla Piccola, who is an expert on paintings in general, South Indian paintings in particular. And she had taken up a big project studying the paintings of the period 15th to 18th century in southern India. And so we traveled together a number of years. I was doing my own work on Vijayanagar Nayaka sculpture and other aspects, and also seeing what she was doing. So I'd like to acknowledge her contribution, and much of what I'm going to share is taken from what she has shared with me. And I would also like to acknowledge the work of another art historian, Dr. Anna Seastrind, who has worked extensively on Nayaka period paintings. Now, firstly, to place Vijayanagar Nayaka paintings in the wider context of this seminar, online seminar on caves, courts, and beyond the lineage of Indian painting. So in this context, I must say that while a lot of scholarly work has been done on extant painting found in caves such as Ajanta, and even more so, and a lot, on the miniature and other forms of paintings of the courts of the Mughals, the Rajputs, and the Deccan Sultans, hitherto, very little work has been done, scholarly work, on Vijayanagar Nayaka painting. And I think except for the murals at Lepakshi in Andhra, most of them were hardly known by even scholars, much less the general public. Perhaps the lack of art historical engagement with Vijayanagar Nayaka painting, as compared with the intense interest in paintings of contemporary paintings of the Mughals or the Rajputs, etc., is due to the paucity of surviving paintings of the Vijayanagar Nayaka period, the murals. And also because of the difficulty of gaining access to most of these paintings that do survive. There are few who survive, because they are usually in rather inaccessible places in temples. And it's not easy to get to them or to access them for the general public because they are close to the public. Now, as far as South Indian mural paintings are concerned, our previous speaker, Professor Bhel, has already shared about the earlier periods, namely the Pallava, the Pandya, the Chola, and there are fragmentary remains that he has already talked about, the Pallava remains and the Pandyan ones, especially in Sattanavasal, and the Chola paintings in the Brihadishwara temple around the Sanctum Sanctorum. Not that one can access these because they're completely closed to the public, but I must say that once in my lifetime, I had the opportunity to go around this inner prakara. And at that time, I was not concentrating on paintings. There are also sculptures over there. So there is very little prior to the Vijayanagar Nayaka paintings. There are. But after these paintings of the Pallavas, the Pandyas, Cholas, etc., as far as the far south is concerned, there was nothing much till the 16th century. So even in early Vijayanagar period, nothing has survived. It doesn't mean there were no paintings. Of course, there were paintings, but very little of that or nothing has survived. So what I'm really going to talk about of Vijayanagar Nayaka period paintings is of the period 1500 to 1750. So because nothing has survived of the earlier period and later period is beyond the scope of this particular lecture. Now, most of the fragmentary remains of Vijayanagar Nayaka period paintings are to be found in Andhra, a few in Karnataka, and a large amount in Tamil Nadu, but these are mostly Nayaka period. Vijayanagar period is mostly in Andhra, and Nayaka period is mostly in Tamil Nadu. Most of these are in temples, a few temple sites where they have survived. The only royal site is the Ramalinga Vilasam Palace. At Ramnath. It's not a palace, it's really a Darbar Hall. At Ramnathpuram, which was the Darbar Hall of the Setupatis of Ramnath, who were the feudatories of the Madurai Nayaks. And since they were contemporary to the Madurai Nayaks, I've included it in this lecture. So as far as Vijayanagar period paintings are concerned, the only extensive set of murals is in the Veerabhadra temple at Lepakshi.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Verghese. Are you moving the slides or?
No, I've not.
Okay. Fine. Okay, fine. Absolutely.
Yes, I have not come to the next slide. There are also some fragmentary remains in Hampi itself. There is nothing. I'll come to that. In the Huchapaya Matha in Anegundi in Hampi, the Chintala Venkatramana temple at Tadpatri, Chenakeshava temple in Somapalam. But if you really go there, you'll see nothing unless you're really looking out for the painting because they're practically disappeared. Now, what about Hampi itself, the capital of the Vijayanagar Empire, because that was the city of Vijayanagar? Most who have visited Hampi will be told that the ceiling paintings in the front mandapa hall of the Virupaksha temple, they are of the Vijayanagar period. And that is what was generally accepted. Until about 25-30 years ago, scholars also accepted that view. However, more recent study on the stylistic aspect of the painting and also on costumes, weapons, etc., have revealed that these are of a much later period. These cannot be of a period earlier than the 18th or early 19th century. And I'll only give one proof of that. Now, here is one of the panels, and on the top we have processions of soldiers, two groups. Now, if you look at these soldiers, you look at the costumes. These soldiers are wearing like knee breeches, which is really of the East India Company style of costume. And they're wearing jackets, which we'd find in Tipu Sultan and contemporary also in the East India Company paintings. They're also having these type of turbans, which we find called the Maratha style turban, or even Tipu Sultan style of turban. And they're holding weapons. Now here, these soldiers, you can't see it so closely in this particular slide, but they hold what appear to be muskets. Now, muskets did not appear in weaponry till much after the period that I am talking about, till later. So these paintings are not of the Vijayanagar period. So in Hampi itself, nothing has really survived of the Vijayanagar period. And this is unfortunate. You'll find some traces of color in some pillars in the Vitala temple, but they're only traces of color. There are no really surviving paintings. Now, with this general background, as far as the wider context is concerned, I'll come to the more specific context of the paintings themselves of this period. Firstly, the Vijayanagar Nayaka murals are found within architectural settings. They were painted to embellish monuments, temples, palaces, etc. The paintings themselves are not the primary focus. Nobody built a structure in order to put a painting in it. They had a structure and they embellished it with painting. So it's the purpose of the painting was not just for the sake of the painting. It is sake of decorating an architectural piece, a monument. So this is something very important. Unlike if you take the Mughal miniatures, they were painted for the sake of paintings, many of them, for albums or whatever they were painted for. The painting has intrinsic value. Here they are a subsidiary value. Purpose rather. They are value because they are paintings. Now, where are they found? They are found mostly in the ceilings and walls, and in temples, in the ceilings and walls of certain processional passages, prakaras, and so on. And so they decorate spaces in temples where the deity is taken in procession or is placed during festivals. That is the context, where the deity is either taken around the temple during processions, the Utsav Murtis of the temples, the processional deities, the festival deities, or is placed in certain mandapas during festivals, and those were decorated more with paintings. Now, it was for the sake of the deity that these places were embellished. As far as the devotee is concerned, the devotee encounters the paintings while engaged in ritual circumambulation or procession through the temples. So you don't sit there to admire the paintings. The paintings are not meant to have been works that you sit and admire or you stand and admire. You see them as you are going along or circumambulating the temple or processing towards the inner part of the temple. So it's not something that you sat and had admired as a great work of art. So this is something to be noted. Fourthly, as the type of murals, some of the murals serve a purely decorative purpose. I'll show example of that, beautiful textile designs, etc. But more commonly, they serve an educative purpose to educate the public. And so quite often they are accompanied by captions which explain what that scene is, and also for devotional purpose. And I'm going to give an example. Now here is a corridor, a prakara corridor, and you see the ceiling is beautifully decorated with some textile patterns, textile design. That's purely decorative. It's very beautiful. It looks like a sari hung on the ceiling, but it's a painting, badly damaged. Then the one on top, this is from the Varadaraja Swami temple. If you go around the inner prakara of it, you have the 108 Vaishnava Divya Deshas. And here among them is the one which I presume is Sriranga. So this serves a devotional purpose. So the devotee going around can have devotion from seeing the paintings of the different gods, different forms of the deity. Then, of course, here are scenes from the Ramayana, which I will be explaining a little later. And so these would serve an educative purpose. They're also inspirational, but they serve an educative purpose. And so that the public can really go through the Ramayana story in detail with all these explanations. Now, I would like to move on to the styles of paintings. Of this entire period from around 1500 to 1750, there are approximately three main styles. The first is the earliest. This is what we find in Lepakshi in Andhra and in two temple sites and also in other parts in Andhra, for example, in Somapalam. But Somapalam, if you go there, you can hardly see anything. These are just traces on the outer mandapa. And then you have in Tamil Nadu, from the Narumbanatha temple in Tirupudai, Marudur, where there is a Gopura, where the entire interior of the Gopura is painted. Very difficult to access the Gopura. I have accessed it twice. Whether these paintings still survive, I do not know, because we accessed it, it's about 10 years ago, and took photographs, etc.
They are there. We visited them
still
a
there.
couple of years. Yeah, we
Oh,
visited
I'm
them
so
a couple
glad.
of years back. Yeah.
I'm so glad
Yeah.
because what happens in some of these temples, they scrape them off. And the ones in Tirupudi, Marudur, they are wonderful because they are in fairly good state, but there are splashes of paint and scratches on it and graffiti and so on. But I have gone there twice and spent extensive time really going around photographing. And Dr. Anna Della Piccola has done a detailed study of all the panels from all the 5 floors of the Gopura. So in this style, if you see, they're quite a distinctive style. So that you would see that here, the character, first of all, the figures are very angular. The features are very sharp and angular. The non-iconic figures are shown in profile. And if you look at the profile, now the face is in profile, but you can see the protruding further eye. Now, if you look at somebody in profile, you can't see the other eye. You can see only the eye that you're seeing. From the side, you're seeing the person. This protruding the eye is the characteristic. They're very sharp features, rather long arms, long fingers, and we also notice that the legs are bowed in a very peculiar way. I mean, you can't really stand like this. So this is a particular stylistic way. See the way here Lord Shiva is standing, that you don't really stand like this, or these other characters also. Also, these are very highly decorative, and the textiles are shown in great detail. You can do a real study on just the textiles available from in that period when you study the Lepakshi murals of the Lepakshi temple. The second style is found only in 2 temple sites. One is the Venugopala Parthasarathi temple at Chengam and the Chennaraya Perumal temple at Atmiyankotte, both in northwestern Tamil Nadu. This is from Chengam. We visited it twice, and it's in the outer mandapa, of just next to the Garbhagriha, the open mandapa. And they have no problem at least they had no problem about anyone photographing it. But if you go to the other temple, the one at Atmiyankotte, they were very, very fussed, and they wouldn't let us even look at the paintings properly, much less photograph it. This style is characterized by very round limbs. The figures have round limbs, that rather exaggerated eyes, and there's an emphasis on line work. See that very fine line work around the figures. The first style, there are no captions at all. Generally, there are no captions. In style 2, group 2, you have some captions quite often within that actual painting. Here, there is a caption over here and somewhere else over here also. That it's inside the painting, which in style 3, it's not inside the painting. Now, the most of the painting belong to the third style. Most of the Nayaka paintings, except the one at the Narumbanatha temple and the Tenpurishwara temple at Pattishwaram, they belong to this style. They're again, they are fairly stout, but not as stout the figures as in the earlier period. And here we have quite clear label inscriptions explaining either in Tamil or Telugu what the scene is all about, as you can see it over here. The others I cut out just to focus on the painting itself. So this is style number 3. Now, with this general background, I move to some of the major themes that we find in the paintings. And I'll touch on 5 major themes and and I'll give you examples of these themes from a few sites so that you get an idea what they were really about. So firstly, epic and Puranic stories. Second, Sthala Puranas and the lives of saints. Third, Vaishnava and Shaiva sacred sites. The fourth are the iconic images of deities. And lastly, patrons, donors, and courtly scenes. So let us take the first. The most commonly found in this group are paintings of the Ramayana. Ramayana was very popular. And there are a number of sites with Ramayana. There were Ramayana paintings. Unfortunately, there are only a few that are really quite extant today. Among the most complete set, there are 3 that should be mentioned. One is the Vasanta Mandapa in Alagar Koil. Alagar Koil is near Madurai. The Kalala Alagar temple outside Madurai. Now, this is the Vasanta Mandapa. Most visiting Alagar Koil, this temple, will hardly go and look at this mandapa. This mandapa is in the outer enclosure and it is locked practically always. Very difficult to get in. Once we got in accidentally because it was open, because they had kept some goats over there. Otherwise, every time it has been locked. Once we actually got permission from the temple authorities, but when we went there, they said, oh, the man with the keys has gone off to Madurai. Now he's not going to come back. And this and that. This is the normal story. They don't want to show you. And then also, so they prefer to keep it locked and they don't like to show it to you. The mandapa is generally in a very bad condition because it is either they use it for storage of junk or keeping hay or wood or whatever it is. They clean it up probably once a year at the time of the Vasanta festival, when actually the processional deities are brought here and certain rituals take place. Now here we have this very beautiful set of the Ramayana. That's the first place. And this is quite an extensive set. The next is in the Gokarneshwara temple at Pudukkottai. There it's in the long entrance mandapa. The ceiling was covered with Ramayana paintings. And the third place with very extensive set is the Ramalinga Vilasam at Ramanathapuram. At least from what we have seen, these are the most extensive sets. Now I'll take up a few scenes from here so that we can see how they are depicted in the 3 sites, so that we'll do a comparative study. Well, all of them have the birth of Ram, of course, because they end in different places. The first one ends, the Alagar Koil, it ends with the awakening of Kumbhakarna in the war at Lanka. Whether the rest was there, we don't know. It's not there extant today. In Pudukkottai, we have the Balakanda, Ayodhya Khanda, and the Aranya Khanda. The rest of the epic is not painted. And then the Ramalinga Vilasam, fairly extensive set is there, but it's not, again, complete. Though we have one scene of Rama enthroned, but the middle, some parts are missing. Now, I'm going to show some selected parts of the Ramayana story. So we begin with the birth of Ram. Now, the most extensive one is the painting at Alagar Koil, which begins with the arrival of Risheshringa. He's brought in procession. He is welcomed in Ayodhya, and he's seated here with Vashishta and the king and so on. And he performs the Putra Kameshti Yajna. We have Agni appearing, and from here, and giving this bowl of whatever we call it, paisam or sweets or whatever it is. And this is given. And so Agni gives it to Risheshringa, Risheshringa gives it to Vashishta, Vashishta gives it to Dasharath, and here Dasharath, it's being taken away, and then Dasharath distributes it among his wives. Here's an attendant with the and the 4 queens, the 3 queens, sorry, and attendants, and so on. And then here the queens are having, eating this paisam in the private chamber, and then the procession back. They had gone out of Ayodhya, now they proceed back to Ayodhya. Now we continue. Now here we have the birthing scene. All of them have the actual scene of the birth. The birthing scene is very interesting how they're portrayed. Queens are standing, each of them in her apartment, behind these textile screens, supported by attendants, attendant women and women holding fans. And so this is how the birth takes place of the 4 princes. And here each baby is being bathed. You can see that, the bathing of the babies. And then an attendant goes off to one of the women attendants informs a male attendant to inform the king. So the male attendant comes here, informs Dasharath about the birth of his sons, and then Dasharath goes to the Saryu river and does the purificatory rite. Now this is the purificatory rite that he's performing, immersed in the Saryu river here. And then he comes out of it, and then he goes to, his sons are brought for Dasharath to see his sons. And then down, Dasharath is very happy. He distributes various gifts of grain and so on to brides. So he's distributing gifts. And then this might be the naming ceremony of the princes. Now, this is in Alagar Koil, where it's very detailed. Now, let us see how it is in the Ramalinga Vilasa. It's very badly damaged. So we can't really see very clearly. Anna has with a, described these, and this is available on her online website on the murals. But at least below we can see the yagna has taken place, and the king is distributing the paisam to his 3 queens. Here the 3 queens eat the paisam, then the king visits them in their apartments. Here is the birthing scene. Can you see? The queens are again standing beside textile screens, and they're giving birth to their sons. And then each queen is seated with her son, and an attendant goes off to inform Dashrath about the birth of his sons. Now here, well, the Dashrath receiving the news, we can't really see it. But here, Dashrath goes off immediately, again to perform the purificatory rites. He's again here immersed in the Saryu River. You can see the lotuses, etc. And this is Dashrath performing the purificatory rites along with some other attendants and so on, and Vashishta and others. And then in the below, Dashrath distributes gifts of grain and cows, etc. to Brahmins because he's so happy at the birth of his sons. Now we see Pudukkottai. All this entire, what is scenes that are shown in great detail in Alagar Koil are compressed into 2 registers, all again with detailed captions explaining what is happening. Putra Kameshti Yagnya, the queens having the paisam, the queens giving birth, the babies are presented, and the king goes and does the purification in this river and gives to Brahmin, that one Brahmin is representing all the Brahmins. So we find some commonality, especially in how the birthing scene is shown. In all 3, they're shown the same way. The queens stand behind textile screens. And in all 3, we have also the king performing the purificatory rites. It's shown in practically the same way. He's taking his dip in the river. Now we see the training of the princes. All the 3 said the training of the princes. So this is in 3 panels in Alagar Koil, how Vashishta is training the princes in boxing, in reading, writing, boxing, horse riding, elephant riding, archery, etc. And again, king is very happy. He's distributing gifts to the Brahmins and so on, because his sons have been well trained. And here, this might be the Upanyana ceremony of the princes. Now, this is at Pudukkottai. Now, it's only in 2 registers. Again, the princes are learning reading, writing, to use the sword and shield, and riding on horseback, on elephants, and whatnot. And again, so it's only in 2 panels that we see it. Now, in Ramnathpuram, we have to remember it's a palace. Training of princes is very important for a royal king, for a king. And so we find this is much more elaborate. Here, well, all these instructions as children are seated and they're being given some instruction. And this goes on. And then all these panels show all the type of training the princes get. So it's in 5 registered, the training of the princes. The next scene that we will compare is the killing of Tataki, because all 3 have the princes go with Vishwamitra to the forest, Ram and Lakshman, and there they encounter various demons, and the demon is Tataki, and Tataki is killed. So here, Vishwamitra, along with Ram and Lakshman, are going to the forest, then they go further into the forest, and then Tataki appears in a very wild, fierce form, and Vishwamitra orders Ram to kill Tataki. And then here Ram is fighting Tataki, and here Tataki is being killed. So you can see Tataki in an aggressive form, and then she's dying. Her body falls off. So it is the death of Tataki. Gods are very happy. They shower blessings on Ram and Lakshman, and then the princes are seated with Vishwamitra. Now this is in Ramnathpuram. Here the princes are seated with Vishwamitra in the forest. Then the Tataki appears suddenly. She's jumping around. Here she's jumping, fighting, etc. And then finally she's killed by Ram with his bow, and her body falls. And again, the gods bless the Ram and Lakshman for what they've done, and Vishwamitra and Ram Lakshman are seated. And this is in Pudukkottai. Again, they proceed to the forest, an appearance of Tataki here, and then Tataki is shot and Tataki is killed. Now let us see the killing of Tataki in all three. Now there's a conflation you will see, Tataki in fighting form and Tataki dying. In the same a picture shows her in both poses. Here Tataki is fighting, Tataki is jumping, she is shot and her body falls down. And here she fighting and the body falls down. So there's a similarity in how it is portrayed. Next is the marriage scene. Now the marriage scene is shown in the greatest detail in Ramnathpuram. And here the marriage of Ram and Sita is shown in greater detail. It's bigger. So Ram, Sita stand on either side of this tree. And then the marriages of the other three brothers. They are also, these are very similar, but Ram is given more prominence. But when we come to the other two sides, the marriages are shown, well, all four are standing on the same level. Bride, bridegroom on either side of a tree with the respective whoever is performing the rituals, etc. Here it's very badly damaged in Alagarkoil. But it's a similar format. Now that is with the Ramayana. Now what about the Mahabharata? Mahabharata practically does not appear except for one story of the Mahabharata, which was popular both in sculpture and in painting. Ramayana appears in sculpture also, in reliefs and so on of this period. But Mahabharata practically never, except the Kiratarjunya story. Now the Kiratarjunya story is when the Pandava brothers were in the forest and were preparing for the war with the Kauravas. Arjuna goes off to do penance in order to get powerful weapons. So he's doing penance. And Indra comes to tempt Arjun or to distract Arjun and say, why are you doing all this penance, etc. But Arjun is not distracted. This is Indra in the form of a Brahmin, he appears, to distract Arjun. But when Arjun is not distracted and keeps to his purpose, then Indra shows himself in his true form and says, you have to do penance and pray to Shiva. Because Lord Shiva has the most powerful weapon, the Pashupata. And Shiva can give you the Pashupata weapon, which will be the most important weapon you need. And so then then Arjun goes off and does more penance. But the penance is so strong that smoke begins to come out all around in the earth, around Arjun. The earth gets very hot. The rishis in the forest where Arjun is doing penance get alarmed because the earth, this global warming in this forest, it is very hot. And so the rishis pray to Shiva, please tell Arjun to stop his penance. So Shiva appears in the form of a hunter, the Kirata, along with Parvati. But before Shiva can approach Arjun, Asura named Mukha, in the form of a wild boar, huge boar, goes rampaging in the forest and almost to attack Arjun. But Arjun shoots at it. The Kirata also shoots at it, and the boar is killed. And then there's a fight between Arjun and the Kirata, both claiming to have shot and killed the boar. And Arjun thinks he's strong, he's stronger, and he can defeat the Kirata, but he cannot defeat the Kirata. So then he makes a linga out of clay, and he begins worshipping this clay linga. But all the flowers he puts on the linga falls onto the head of the Kirata. So then he realizes the Kirata is no one else except Shiva. And so he prostrates before Shiva, and Shiva blesses him, and Shiva Parvati appear, and they give him the Pashupata. Now, the best depiction of the Kiratarjunya is at the Lepakshi temple, where in the entrance open mandapa, we have the Kirata in great detail. All the panels are not fully in a good condition, but there are some very good panels, and I've taken two of this one of Arjun in penance, and then Indra in the guise of an ascetic or Brahmin, then Indra showing himself in his true form, and Arjun prostrating before Indra, and Indra telling him what to do. And here the boar appearing, and here the Kiratas, and here Shiv Parvati in Kirata form seated. The rishis are all terrified with this boar, and then of course it goes on and on and on. Now, where else do we find it? We do have this in the Gopura at Tirupudai Maradur, but in a condensed form. Now here we have, this is Arjun. Arjun leaves his brothers and goes towards the forest. He proceeds to the forest and so on. And then finally he's doing penance, standing on one foot. And the boar is also there and with the arrow. So it's conflation. That Arjun in penance and the killing of the boar and the appearance of the Kirata, fight between Kirata and Arjun here. And the fight continues here. And finally, Shiva appears in his divine form, and Arjun prays to Shiva and gets the Pashupata weapon. So that is as far as the Ramayana and this Mahabharata concerned. Now we'll say, between the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, why was the Ramayana so popular? Now the answer is pretty obvious. Because Ram was the ideal king, and so the Vijayanagar Nayaka rulers, or the Setupatis and so on, well, they wanted to identify themselves closely with Ram, and thereby indirectly get also benefit by themselves. So they are, like Ram was the ideal king, so they are in their own in their own realms, also showing that they are ideal kings like Ram. So the Ramayana was very popular, whether in sculpture or in painting. Now we come to the Bhagavata Purana. Bhagavata Purana we do find in sculpture, but we don't find the birth of Krishna so much in painting as compared to the Ramayana. But we do have quite an extensive set in the Ramalinga Vilasam. And I'm showing you a few scenes of that. Now, this is the birth of Krishna. Now, Krishna has been born, and Vasudeva, to save the baby Krishna from the anger of Kamsa, he takes the baby across and he takes him across the river Yamuna. This is the Yamuna, which is parting to give way to Vasudeva to cross. And then he reaches the home of Nanda, where he exchanges the babies. Devaki's baby with Yashoda's baby. Yashoda has given birth to a baby girl. She's fast asleep. So he places Krishna by her side and takes the baby girl. He returns to Mathura, places the baby girl by the side of Devaki. Kamsa appears, grabs the baby, tries to kill her, but she emerges in the divine form of the goddess and warns Kamsa that Krishna is alive and that Krishna will one day kill him. And so, of course, then all the other stories that go on about how various Kamsa tries to kill Krishna. So finally, Vasudeva and Devaki are released, and that is the first part, the birth of Krishna. Now, how the killing of Kamsa, the rest of the stories of all the other trials Krishna goes through and so on, not showing. But here, Krishna appears, he's reached Mathura, and he's pulling down Kamsa from his throne and killing him. So here we have the attendants, the soldiers of Kamsa fighting Krishna, and Krishna has killed Kamsa, and he's standing on his dead body. And then the courtiers are very happy that this tyrant is dead. In the next, the brothers of Kamsa appear, and they fight with Krishna and Balaram, and here that is going on. Then they are defeated. Then Krishna and Balaram pay homage to Vasudeva and Devaki. And then the coronation of Ugrasena as king of Mathura, it goes on. And then finally, Krishna and Balaram bid goodbye to Nanda and the Gopas, and they depart. This is the Bhagavata Purana. So these are now finished with the epic and Puranic stories. Now we come to the lives of saints. I will just take a few examples we come to Sthala Puranas, not lives of saints. Sthala Puranas are stories of sacred sites. Sthala Puranas became very popular in southern India from the 14th century, and more particular from the 16th century. And every sacred site, every important temple has number of one Sthala Purana or more than one Sthala Purana. So I'll take the Sthala Purana of two Shaiva important sites, which are in the Kaveri Delta area. Not quite in the Kaveri Delta, but in the Chola Kingdom area. One is the temple at Chidambaram, which was the most popular temple for the Cholas, and as far as the Shiva temples are concerned. And the other of the temple at Tiruvarur, the Tyagaraja temple, which was again temple very much patronized by the early Cholas. If you come to Chidambaram, there are many Sthala Puranas, many stories about Chidambaram and saints and others associated. But among them, the most popular is the story of Vyagrapada and Patanjali. Vyagrapada is the sage with the tiger claws, and Patanjali, the sage with the snake's tail. These, when you see images of Nataraj, these two devotees are on either side of Nataraj, and they are associated with Nataraj of Chidambaram. But they were not originally sages with these animal or snake lower part of the body. So the story of Vyagrapada, these are painted on two part of the ceiling of the Shiva Kama Sundari temple, a shrine at Chidambaram in the entrance mandapa. We have very nice paintings over there. And here the story of Vyagrapada, I won't go in from the beginning, but he's a Brahmin boy born to sage Madhyadina and his wife. And Madhyadina teaches his son the future Vyagrapada and advises him, etc. And his son becomes a great Shiva Bhakta. And he tells his son, Madhyadina, to go to Chidambaram and worship Shiva there. So father and son proceed to Chidambaram. Here they've reached Chidambaram. They first worship the Moolasthana, that is the original linga at Chidambaram. And then they go to the temple itself, and this is supposed to be the Chidambaram temple. Then he goes into the forest around Chidambaram. Now the father has gone away, and the young sage is left alone in the forest, where he goes praying before various lingas in the forest. Here's a black linga, here is a temple tank. Near here he's seated before another linga, he's worshipping the linga, and then he goes and sits here. It's night and he wants to gather flowers to continue his pujas. Now he encounters a problem, because if he plucks the flowers in the morning, the bees have already taken all the honey out of out of the flowers. But if he tries to collect it at night, he can't see the flowers. And then there are thorns, etc. So he prays to Shiva, help me so that I can gather flowers for you at night before the bees have got active and pulled out all the honey from the flowers. And so Shiva then gives him the boon of having tiger claws and also eyes in the tiger claws so that he can see at night. And so now this sage in the form of the tiger claws appears. He is seated in Chidambaram. This is the Chitta Sabha, Kanaka Sabha, etc. And this Chitta Sabha is empty. He is waiting for Shiva to appear to do the Ananta Tandava, dance, the divine dance of divine bliss, because that's what he wants to see, Shiva dancing at Chidambaram. So that is the story of Vyagrapada. Now the story of Patanjali. Patanjali was originally Sheshnag, the great Sheshnag, and Sheshnag's son. Sheshnag wants to see the dance of Shiva. He wants to see Shiva. So he goes and prays to Vishnu. Vishnu is here, says, how do I get to see Shiva? I want to see Shiva and the dance of Shiva. So Vishnu says, you go to Kailasha and do penance at Kailasha. So he goes to Kailasha, this is Sheshnag, and he does the Pancha Agni Tapas, standing between 4 fires and under the blazing sun. And he's doing penance. Now Brahma appears to distract Sheshnag. And he says, what are you doing all this? I can give you any boon you want. You don't do all this penance. So Sheshnag is not at all distracted. He says, I don't want anything. I only want to see the dance of Shiva. But this was not Brahma. It was actually Shiva himself in the form of Brahma to test Sheshnag. So Shiva shows himself and says, fine, I will dance and show you my divine dance. But you have to go now down from Kailasha. You have to go to Chidambaram. So Sheshnag has to traverse a long distance. And in order to help him, he has a human form and a snake's tail. And so we see him is going here, there. And finally, after traversing many distances, he comes to Chidambaram. And this is the Chitta Sabha, Kanaka Sabha, etc. Both the sages, you can't see them because the painting is damaged. They are seated and watching the dance of Shiva in the Chitta Sabha at Chidambaram. So this is one of the Sthala Puranas, the story of Vyagrapada and Patanjali. Now I'll show you the story of Tyagaraja of Tirvarur. It's a very interesting story. And by the way, this is beautifully painted in this mandap called the Devasiriya Mandap, which if you go to Tirvarur, it is on the easternmost outer prakara, on the eastern side. As you enter through the eastern main Gopura, outer Gopura, this mandapa is to your right as you are proceeding. But the mandapa is always locked. So to access the paintings is very, very difficult. The number of times I visited Tirvarur, we did access it once with permission, with very special permission, because they keep it locked. And once we happened to see it open. So it's not that every time you go there, you can access the paintings. But we have accessed the paintings. And it's a very large mandapa, so the whole ceiling is not painted. But in the easternmost part of the mandapa, the ceiling is painted with the story of Tyagaraja. Now, what is the story of Tyagaraja? Tyagaraja is the Utsav Murti of the Tiruvarur temple. The main Murti is Valmikinath, a linga that emerged from the anthill. That was the original Mula Murti of this temple. Tyagaraja is a processional divinity cast in metal. It's a metal Murti. But today, the Tyagaraja is far more important, popular. So if you go to Tiruvarur temple, you'll find the crowds are all gathered to have a darshan of Tyagaraja. Well, we had the good fortune of just in January 2025 of visiting this temple. I visited it earlier also. Now, this is the Tyagaraja Murti. Where did he appear from? Well, this Murti was made by Vishnu. Apparently, Vishnu offended Parvati because he didn't wish her once. So Parvati got very offended and she gave a curse to Vishnu. To get out of this curse, Vishnu made this Murti. It's a Somaskanda, a form of Shiva, Parvati, with the baby Skanda or Kartikeya. And he worshipped it and he placed this Murti on his chest. And while he is reclining in the cosmic ocean, and every time he breathed, the Murti would go up and down. This is called the Ajapa dance, the dance that with the breath of Vishnu. So he is hugging this Murti to his bosom, and the Murti is there. He cherishes it very much. But Indra comes, and here's Indra, and he prays to Vishnu, please give me the Tyagaraja Murti. I would like to have. So Vishnu very generously gives Tyagaraja. Here's Vishnu giving Tyagaraja to Indra. Indra takes it to his heaven and enshrines Tyagaraja. Indra fights various demons, and once he was fighting a demon called Vallasura, and this demon was too powerful. So he called the help of the Chola king, a legendary Chola king called Muchukunda, the king with the monkey face. Now this is Muchukunda, and Muchukunda helped him to fight this Vallasura. And so, of course, Muchukunda had to be rewarded. And Indra told him, you ask me whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Now, Muchukunda in a dream had seen Tyagaraja. And he said, I don't want anything, but you have Tyagaraja in your heavenly port. I want Tyagaraja. I don't want anything else. Well, Indra was very upset because he didn't want to give Tyagaraja. He said, okay, I'll give it to you if you can identify Tyagaraja. So he called Twashtar, the artisan of the gods, and he said, design 6 other murtis identical to Tyagaraja. And he placed all of them side by side. And he told Muchukunda, the monkey face king, you identify the correct murti of Tyagaraja and I'll give it to you. Well, Muchukunda did. And so Indra was forced to give it to him. Then Indra said, anyway, I'm giving you the main Tyagaraja, my murti. I'll give you all the 6 also. You take them all. So he gives them all the other 6. And Muchukunda brings them down to his Chola kingdom. He places the Tyagaraja Murti in the temple of Valmikinath. Here is the linga. Tyagaraja is placed in another shrine next to the linga. Please notice the shrine of Tyagaraja is larger than the shrine of the original Mula Murti. This is the actual situation in the Tyagaraja temple. And then the other 6 murtis are placed in other temples in his kingdom. You'd think they're all placed side by side. They are not. In 2025, along with Dr. Anna Dalla Piccola and another colleague, Lata Pujari, we went on a pilgrimage tour to see all the 7 Tyagarajas. Well, the main Murti, which was easy to find because it's in Tiruvarur. The other 7 were not so easy and they're spread over 3 districts. And we did find them. And they're all same type of Murti, but they're not of the same size and so on and so forth. And they're not next to each other. So this is the story of Tyagaraja. Now we move on from there to the lives of saints. And I'll take 2 Shaiva saints, Manika Vachaka and Sambandha. They're among the most important among the 4 great Shaiva saints. Now we have the story of Manika Vachaka painted in Tirupudai Marudur, part of the story, but it's very badly damaged, as you can see. You can hardly see anything. Now Manika Vachaka was a minister of the Pandyan king of Madurai. Now the king was a devotee of Shiva, so he gave his minister money and said, go off and buy some horses. I want horses. So the minister went off to buy horses, but en route he met a Shaiva ascetic. The Shaiva ascetic was no one else but Shiva himself. and Shiva converted Manika Vachagar and made him a devotee. So Manika Vachagar decided he's not going to buy horses. He will use the money of the king instead to build a Shiva temple. So he built a temple. Of course, king was furious when he came back without horses, so he punished Manika Vachagar. But Shiva came to rescue him by bringing horses. He disguised as a horse trader, he brings horses and gives it to the king. The horses are placed in the horse stables of the king, but they turn into jackal and begin attacking all the king's horses, etc. Then Manika Vachagar is punished again, and then Shiva again saves him by bringing a flood of the river Vaigai and flood through Madurai, and so on and so forth. And finally, Manika Vachagar leaves the king. He goes off converting Buddhists to Hinduism, and even travels to Sri Lanka, supposed to be, and defeating Buddhists in argument, converting them to Hinduism, and finally he merges with Shiva in Chidambaram. But all this is not depicted in Tirupudai Marudur. Here the story ends with the building of the Shiva temple. But we have the full story in Chidambaram, again in the Shivakama Sundari's shrine. In the one side is the story of Vyagrapada and Patanjali, and the other side we have this Manika Vachagar story. I'm only showing you little bits of it. Here you have those horses have turned into jackals and they are causing havoc over there. A lot of blood is flirting around. And so Tyagaraja is, Manika Vachagar is punished with the tied up here with stone on his back. And then the river floods. I mean, Shiva sends this flood. You can see people are all swimming in the flood and the house is floating and all that. So then the king has to again let Manika Vachagar go. And finally, after he does all various things he does, Manika Vachagar comes to Chidambaram. And finally, he's here before Shiva, Nataraja and Shiva Kamasundari. And finally, he merges into Shiva Nataraja. That is the story of Manika Vachagar. Equally interesting is the story of the boy saint, boy Sambandar. It's a child saint. Well, Sambandar was seated in his hut praying, and the hut catches fire. I mean, his enemies are attacking him all the time, but the fire doesn't destroy the hut. In the meantime, agents of the king of Madurai come, saying the king of Madurai is called due to Madurai. And so he's taken in a palanquin to Madurai. He goes to Madurai. The king is very sick. He has called Jain Munis to cure him. They can't cure him. So he calls his boy saint, and Sambandar cures. So the king is very impressed, and he wants to see who is more powerful, who's got greater divine Shakti, whether Sambandar or the Jain Munis. So he says, do something to show your powers. So here first they both burn leaves of their holy books, put it into the fire. Those of Sambandar don't burn. Those of the Jain Munis burn. Then they throw it into the the river. Those of the Jain Munis float away. But those of Sambandar don't float away. So anyway, the king is very impressed. He converts to Shaivism. And then finally the Jains are defeated in all these arguments, and the Jains are killed, the Munis, unfortunately. So basically, both these saints and the great Shaiva, the revival under the Nine Mars was the revival of Hinduism, and the decline of Jainism and Buddhism took place at that time in the whole southern region, especially Tamil Nadu. But these stories depict that. Okay. Now we come to the sacred sites. In the Tamil tradition, there are 108 Vaishnava sacred sites called the Divya Desha or the Divya Kshetras, and 275 Shaiva sacred sites. In temples, you'll find modern representations of these also. If you go around some of the temples, you will find modern paintings. But there were paintings in the Nayaka period also. But very few have survived. Fairly extensive sets were available. I say were. In southern Tamil Nadu, in the inner prakara of the Sri Vaikuntham temple, the Kallapiran Swami temple at Sri Vaikuntham. Difficult to access because this inner prakara, which is around the Sanctum Sanctorum, is usually locked. In all my visits to this temple, and I visited many times, we found it open twice. The first was in 2013, The second time was in 2026. 2013, they were doing some work, and so our photographer went inside and photographed it. And you can see these are quite extensive, the paintings, and they go all around. Ceiling paintings are something else, textiles and so on. But around the walls, we have the 108 Divya Kshetras. When we went again in 2026, it happened to be open. So we peeped in, and we found that they're in a way, some of these panels have disappeared. So within 10 years, many have disappeared. The other is the Varadaraja Swami temple in Kanchipuram. There you can go around because it's just around the Sanctum Sanctorum, and that is not locked. But again, in a very dilapidated condition. Now, do we have Shaiva, Vaishnava together? No Vaishnava site you will find Shaiva holy sites. But in some Shaiva holy places, we do find Vaishnava. And this is Natam in Kovilpatti, where on one of the mandapas, you have both Shaiva and some Vaishnava sacred sites painted. And we also have in the Ramalinga Vilasam, both Shaiva and Vaishnava. Now, what about full set of the 275? The only one we found, but in a very, very, very badly damaged condition, is in the Atmanatha temple at Audiyar Kovil. In the outer mandapa, they're all painted on the ceiling, but you can practically not make them out. Now, how do you know it's a sacred site? Depictions of sacred sites have certain elements that you will find. Well, the simplest is the murti, the main murti, or the consort also sometimes. Sometimes geographical aspects associated with the site. Maybe some aspect of the Sthala Purana. Maybe the sacred tree of the site. Maybe the sacred tirtha of the site is also depicted, and sometimes saints associated with the site. I'll show a few examples of how they are depicted. Now here, this is the Kutralnatha temple at Kutralam. Kutralam is right southern Tamil Nadu on the borders of Kerala. It's all in the hilly area, and there is the famous Kutralam Falls. Now this is one of the 5 great sites where Shiva danced, Kutralam. So there are 5 places besides Nataraj is one of Chidambaram, but there are 4 others where Shiva is supposed to have danced, and Kutralam is one of them, the Kutralnatha temple. Now here you'd see there is the main murti, the shrine of Shiva. There's the shrine of the goddess. These are actually there even today. We had gone to Kutralam just, I think in 2000, some months ago. But of course, now there are prakaras built around. This is how it was maybe. This is the sacred tree of Kutralam. This particular site is the jackfruit tree. You can see the jackfruits here. Then there are devotees depicted. There are also temple priests. But what is very interesting is that the tirtha of this site is actually the Kutralam Falls. So this is the Kutralam Falls falling down the rocks. Here are some lingas in the rocks. And what I found most interesting are these monkeys. These monkeys are not anything divine, but Kutralam is even today famous for monkeys. And you find plenty of monkeys in Kutralam. Our first visit was in 2003, I think. And we had booked into one of the small hotels near the falls. But we ran away from there. We were 3 women because these monkeys were all over the place and not letting us get out of our rooms even because they were fighting each other and making such a din in the veranda around of that particular hotel that we left the place. And so even today, if you go, you'll find these monkeys. So this is Kutralam. Now I'll show you one Shaiva and one Vaishnava sacred sites. So just to get an idea, this is the Meenakshi Sundareshwar temple. Now, the shrine of Shiva, Sundareshwara, is characterized by these supposedly white elephants at the base. Now, here you can see the white elephants. You can see it here also, these elephants. And here the elephants. Now, this is part of the Sthala Purana of these white elephants. Now, this is at Ramnathpuram is very simple, Shiva temple and the Meenakshi shrine. The 2 shrines are there. Here it is a little more elaborate. You have the main shrine of Shiva, the shrine of Parvati, and you have a lot of people also shown. The one here at Natham is even more elaborate. You have the Shiva shrine with the elephants. You have a Siddha seated at the side, and he is holding something which is a sugar cane, because there's a story, the king challenged him. Well, can you make the stone elephants eat sugar cane? And he made it eat. So he was actually Shiva himself. And then we have sub-shrines of Ganesha, Nataraja, etc. One Vishnu shrine, the shrine of Sarangapani. Sarangapani is reclining Vishnu holding the saranga or the bow in his left hand. So here from Ramnathpuram, this is from Natham, and this is from Sri Vaikuntham. They all have the saranga, the bow. Some have the Utsav Murtis in front. Some have the consort goddesses. But this one is very interesting because Sarangapani is reclining on Sesha. But his shrine, there are wheels and there are horses in front. If you go to the actual Sarangapani temple in Kumbakonam, you'd find the shrine is shaped like a chariot with horses in front and with chariot wheels. And this is the Tirtha, the great temple tank, which is not so small like this. It's a large temple tank. So this is Sarangapani. Now we come to iconic figures. Iconic images of gods are normally shown not in profile. Quite often they are shown frontally. There are not as many as you have these other scenes, but you do have iconic images. This is a large Veerabhadra in the inner mandapa of the Veerabhadra temple at Lepakshi. It's an enormous one, covers the entire ceiling. And you have Virupanna, who was the donor, who was the local governor in adoration in front of Veerabhadra. Tirupudai Marudur, we have this reclining Vishnu, and we have the Das avatars. The Das avatars, the Rama avatar is given more importance. The other avatars are shown below. Now, this is now depictions of donors and devotees, etc. Now, these are donor figures. These are actually Vijayanagar period historical figures. These are supposedly Virupanna and his brother Veeranna, who were the patrons of the rebuilding or refurbishing of the Veerabhadra temple at Lepakshi. And they're worshipping Veerabhadra. And you can see the costumes, the textiles, etc. Then we have, in the Ramalinga Vilasam, the actual patron is Muttu Raghunatha Vijay Raghunatha Setupati. And here he is facing some paintings of deities. Here we have a very interesting painting of him receiving the scepter from the tutelary deity of the Setupatis, namely the goddess Rajarajeshwari. This is very similar to a painting in the Meenakshi temple, where we have the Regent Mangabal receiving the Chenkol from Meenakshi through a priestly intermediary. We have some portraits with labels identifying the persons. This is Tondaiman. There's minor ruling family from Audiyar Koel. Their names are given there. Some temple officials, their names are given here. And here at Natham, we have some donor figures. Their names are given: Chokalinga Naidu, Ramachandra Sadashiv, etc. Now, paintings of patrons and donors are not as common in painting. In painting, we don't find them as much as we find in Nayaka period sculpture. In sculpture, at this period, we find them on pillars in practically all the major temples. But painting, we do have examples. Now, courtly scene, we have only from Ramnathpuram that I am aware of. This is the Setupati engaged in a warfare. And he has got some Dutch gunner in front here, helping him. Setupati receiving, and one of his principal queens, receiving a foreign envoys. They're seated on chairs, and so is he. And he's dressed very formally, holding his scepter and so on. Now you see the Setupati then eating when he is in his inner apartments. He's dressed very differently from his formal attire. And here he's having a huge meal, and his queen also. These all the servants and the Brahmins were serving him, and he's certainly got an enormous meal in front of him. And then we have the Setupati with his ladies and so on. So these are from the Ramalinga Vilasam in the upper floor. Now, what about the fate of these murals? These murals are in a very bad condition, and they're really rapidly declining. And we don't know what the future is going to be, because much of it, there's not much care taken of them. So we find splashes of paint, there is graffiti or water seepage, the paintings are getting damaged, or they're being painted over. This is something, when you paint over the paintings, now often in acrylic paint, etc., the original is gone. This is what we saw in the Jinna Kanchi, the temple, the Jain temple at Tiruparithi Kundram, that's outside Kanchipuram, where the original painting has been painted over. And this, what we actually saw happening, the Ramayan painting in the front mandapa of the open mandapa of the Andal shrine when we visited the place in 2013. We visited it a few years later. It's all been painted up, but they wouldn't let us take that picture of it. They became very, very touchy about pictures at all. Now you can't photograph in Srivilliputtur. Now with this, I end and I thank you. And that is the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Varghese. Oh my God, what an amazing collection of pictures. I don't think we have seen all of them or seen them in their context, most definitely not. Thank you so much for putting them in their social, cultural, and religious context. I think we'll quickly move on to the question answer session, and I'll ask Ashwin to moderate.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Gauri. Thank you, Professor Varghese, for such a crisply delivered talk, yet packed with so much critical information. So there's so much to process for all of us, like Gauri said. And also, we're very grateful that you spoke on this topic, because this is not a topic which gets spoken of enough in public fora. So we're very grateful at Tamil Heritage Trust you could speak to us on this theme. Thank you.
Thank you. I must say the photographs, a few are mine, but the majority, Dr. Anna had a professional photographer. So, and when we got permission or when we sneaked in sometimes and we didn't have permission, he was a very good photographer, see Ganeshan. So he managed to get very good photographs. And I've been permitted to use all those photographs. Thank you.
Lovely. Professor Varghese, if I may ask, how much time do you have? And accordingly, I can decide on the number.
Okay, now anyway, it's late, so maybe another 10 minutes here.
Okay, so very good. So I'm going to ask with what may seem like an obvious question. At the risk of sounding provocative, I really would like you to comment on the quality of the art aesthetic of this era of art. From a comparative frame, vis-a-vis some of the visuals we have seen in earlier talks in this festival, largely from sites like Ajanta, Tanjavur, Panamalai, and Sittanavasal and all of those. But I want to also kind of caveat this question by saying, would such a comparison even be fair? Right? So that's number one. But primarily from an academic standpoint, what can one understand from such an exercise? About the artists, about their craft, about the patrons, the style of work. What would such a comparative study reveal?
To be honest, I don't think I'm qualified to talk about the quality of painting. And I think paintings of each period have to be taken by themselves. Now, for example, if you go around that inner prakara of the Brihadishwara temple, Nayaka paintings were covering the Chola paintings. Now, I mean, some of it has been taken out to reveal the Chola paintings, which are below. Now, this happened. Each group of people painted over what was there earlier. And so I can't say this is greater or that is greater. If you ask me Chola sculpture and Vijayanagar sculpture, I'll definitely tell you the great Chola pieces, there's nothing to rival that. Or Pallava. I'll say that honestly. Though all my life I worked on Vijayanagar, I'll say Vijayanagar is different. It's very interesting and it has aspects that are totally different, but it cannot compare with the great masterpieces of the Cholas and Pallavas. But I can't say about painting. Firstly, I'm not qualified to, and that it is different, and you can't really compare with Ajanta. The way Ajanta paintings are very different, and here they are very crisp in registers like that. Ajanta, the stories go on, and people say Ajanta and murals and these. We went to Ajanta just to see that, and we saw one story will merge into another story and another story like that. They are not in clear, that this story ends and the next story begins, or this sequence, that sequence, which you saw in the Nayaka period particularly, with captions explaining what exactly it is. So I don't think it's fair to really compare between this and that. And each one has to be and that is what happened. People said, oh, this is all rubbish. Vijayanagar, Nayaka period, compared to the great Cholas, the great Pandyas, the Chalukyas. They said this is inferior. It is different. And it has its own beauty, whether it's sculpture, whether it's painting, and certainly architecture. So this is something you have to grow to appreciate, and you can't compare.
Fair enough. Talking about sculpture in your research and study of both Vijayanagara architecture and art, have you seen any interlinkages or dialogue happening between the murals you showed us, which is the painting tradition, with the sculpture and relief panels of Vijayanagara era temples? I mean, is there any interplay between the two? Because we have seen that happen in other in other
I
eras?
won't say interplay is difficult to see because these paintings are not where there's so much of sculpture. But we see the same themes in sculpture. Some of the same themes. You'll find Ramayana, at least not, and there are places with Ramayana and Bhagavata quite detailed. Tadpatri, for example, has Ramayana and Bhagavata, and they also had paintings. The paintings have that Tadpatri is in Andhra, practically disappeared. But so
we talk to each other, the painting and the sculpture?
I don't think they're talking to each other. They are different artists painting what they're doing. But you find the same themes. Sacred sites, I thought that they weren't, I really at first noticed it is in sculpture, though I didn't recognize them as sacred sites, a few of them. So they are there. A patron, now when you come to donor figures and patrons, in sculpture, there are plenty. I don't think there are different people doing this and different people doing that. Similar themes. I don't think that they were thinking in all these great artistic ways. These were craftsmen doing their craft. And they are hired to do that. And they did it. I don't think they were thinking of, that here's a sculptor and I'm a painter and these are going to talk to each other.
So you mean the representations or the compositions, there is not too much similarity between the sculpture and the paintings?
Yeah, no, the Ramayana, you'll find the same story. The Ramayana has to be the Ramayana.
No, not the story. I mean to say in terms of how they are composed.
No, because see, sculpture is a different medium, no? So it's very,
Okay.
so the donor will be standing like that, yes. So you'll see whether the donor Setupati is standing like that in painting. If you see a sculpture, you don't have this particular Setupati, but if you find all donor sculptures, they're standing like that. And they're facing towards the divinity or deity or where the deity will be taken in procession. So the placement is similar. Here, they're actually standing in adoration before a painting of a divinity. In the temples where the sculptures would be, they are placed in places where Dutsa Murtis would be taken in procession. So in that sense, there are similarities, but they're two different idioms. And there's much more of sculpture than there is of painting. There's too little of painting really to talk very extensively about painting. Because this is maybe not even 1% has survived. Unlike sculpture has survived. But painting hasn't survived.
Yeah, I want to come up with
all the pictures were painted, yeah.
Yeah, if I may just come in with a question from one of our viewers. I think her name is Divya. And she asks, are the Sthala Purana sets synoptic, which I think she means summative in nature, or are they continuous visual narratives, like let's say the Ramayana panels?
They're
Or the
continuous.
Ramayana
They're
murals?
continuous. You could see that the story, now for example, Vyagrapada, it begins with Shiva Parvati seated in heaven and talking to each other, then the birth of the sage, and till the sage finally merges with Shiva.
And the Tyagaraja
sorry. Tyagaraja it
composition
ends,
as well, which you showed.
Tyagaraja, I'll tell you, yes. Tyagaraja is brought down, he's enshrined, then he's taken in possession. So the Tyagaraja story is there from the time Tyagaraja Murti is placed on the... So they are continuous. But some parts are damaged, so we can't say how far, because now the Ramayana at Alagar Koil, the last part is damaged. So we don't know whether it continued until where it continued. We really don't know. But sometimes the panels, even the sculptures, we don't find the tail end of it. It's not that from the beginning, from Putra Kameshti right up to coronation of Ram, that you will necessarily find. None of the paintings, we find all of them.
But largely narrative, but in registers. That is.
And they may have been, but the rest is gone. We don't know. But it is narrative. So certainly the one that we saw, the life of Manika Vachakar, for example, that is, we have his whole story, the one in the Shivakama Sundari temple. That, the whole story till he merges, he brings the Buddhists from Sri Lanka and he fights, kills them. And they are killed. I don't know who killed them. And then he finally goes here, there and everywhere converting people. And then he merges, he's shown merging. That's the end of his life. Because he's merged into Nataraj. And so that we do have about Sambandhar, I'm not very clear whether the whole story is there. So we do have, and Vyagrapada and Patanjali, yes, because they're finally seated seeing this great dance. That's what they wanted. So that's their story. And then they become devotees and permanently by either side of the Nataraja.
What are the textual captions in these paintings which you spoke of revealed? That was fairly unique. Are these textual captions purely explanatory in nature in terms of what the subject matter is, and maybe hence of limited value, or have scholars learned something new and original from these textual captions?
I see, I can't say that because very few people have studied them. You can't stand there and be reading it. It's very difficult. These, what Anna Della Piccola, because she's got a website on the murals, she had Telugu and Tamil scholars to translate them. They're all there on her, you can try and access her website where all these are shown, the entire story, and what you can't really see with the naked eye like that. She has explained them in detail, and all the captions are also translated. So mostly they're telling you the stories, but I also showed you labels where the names of the people are given. They've given the names. So this is Ramalinga, whatever his name, somebody Naidu and somebody Chokalinga, somebody or the other. So there, which you don't find in sculpture. Sculpture, you don't never find their names carved below their particular image. People may have recognized them because some are recognizable. For example, some of the Madurai Nayaks, you can recognize them. But otherwise, you can't say that that there are captions saying who the Nayak is. But here we had some paintings with that. Okay. So, I mean, thank you. And I hope you found it interesting. And if you do visit, I mean, I'm fortunate that I've had a chance. I've been doing this from 2001, practically every year, except 2 years of the pandemic. We have traveled for some time, though I've had other jobs. We have traveled extensively in southern India. That's why we have been able, and Anna had this big project on documenting this. That's why we have seen these perhaps more than anyone. Most people have seen these. Let's put it like that.
Ashwin, do you want to wrap up with one last question or something?
Yeah, let me just check and see if, yeah, there was this one question, Professor Varghese, on speaking of continuity across eras of painting, which I think Professor Bell touched on. At first looking at some of these paintings from the Vijayanagara Nayak era, there seems to be a quality of almost fabric kind of design in them. Which then leads to the question, was there continuity in these painting styles crossing over into textile design in the Andhra region specifically with its Kalamkari kind of tradition? So any insights on that?
The textile patterns are very detailed only in the group 1 style. The later style, the textile patterns are not so much in detail. Actually, if you study the...
Sorry, let me just explain. I wasn't talking about the textiles depicted in the paintings. I was talking about this style of illustration crossing over from, let's say, walls and ceilings into fabric.
I think it may have been the other way around. I think so. They're showing the actual fabrics that existed. And so these are the fabrics that were produced at that time. You can make a study of that. What type of fabrics were produced? What type of patterns were produced at that time? And
no, I'm sorry, Dr. Varghese. What he's trying to say is these paintings that were there on walls and murals, did the same kind of paintings translate onto fabrics later, like Kalamkari and all that?
Did they paint these same things?
Yeah.
Yes.
Into Kalamkari and all that.
See, I am only touching on murals. This whole tradition continued into textile painting, into the scroll paintings. They serve the same purpose of education. So you have the Andhra scrolls, you have the Kalamkaris. Kalamkaris also, you have the entire Ramayana. Or you can do the life of Jesus also. You can do. I mean, I've seen one done by modern Kalamkaris. So it's the same idea. It did translate.
So it crossed over from one medium to the other as a continuous tradition.
Perhaps both existed. We don't know. See, not much of the textiles of that 16th century have survived. But so we can't say. But maybe that existed then also. But it has certainly.
Because stylistically, there seem to be quite remarkably similar as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it has. You do have in Andhra, you have a very rich tradition of all these Kalamkaris and scroll paintings and so on and so forth. The Cheriyal scrolls.
I think I'll stop with that then, Professor. Thank you, Gauri, if you can just formally close the proceeding.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Varghese. Thank you for that wonderful lecture and making us understand what is the continuity and relevance of these paintings and the need to be delving into them a lot more deeper than what is actually happening currently. And thank you for also answering all our question answer session patiently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. As we come to the end of day 2, as we come to the end of day 2, I'd like to thank both our speakers, Professor Binoy Behel and Dr. Anila Varghese, for their wonderful, insightful lectures and imparting so much of information to us. Thanks to Ashwin Prabhu for moderating. Tomorrow, we have a new day and a new theme, manuscripts and portable painting traditions, and 2 more lectures lined up for us. We hope all of you will be logging in to listen. From the Tamil Heritage Trust, thank you to all our audience and good night.